Oh, you hear? Joe, can you hear me?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hey, Joe Johnson's here. Unix. Absent. Hartman. Here. Don McKay is absent.
Warren and Nix were absent. Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is United Zoning Code update, user regulation table.
Do we need to approve some minutes or?
Yeah, we just did. I'm sorry, Joe. I didn't.
I'm sorry, I was off.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Momita Kunju from the Planning Department, and I'll be presenting case DR 2023-00012 for an amendment to the uses regulation table in the Unified Zoning Code Article 3D5. Next slide, please. This is an action item. So the Advanced Plan Committee is recommended that the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission recommends this to initiate an amendment to the Unified Zoning Code Article 3D5, approve the proposed Unified Zoning Code amendments, and recommend that the governing bodies adopt the proposed Unified Zoning Code amendments. Next slide, please. The uses table in the existing Unified Zoning Code provides a quick and easy reference to find out if any defined use is permitted by right or is a conditional use in each zoning district. So here is a snapshot of the existing uses regulation table, and you are provided with a full version of the existing uses regulation table in the staff report. And as you can see that in the table, with the uses are noted with a P for permitted by right use and C for conditional use, and it has lists of uses on the left over here, and the zoning districts on the top. There are only two categories of uses in this existing table: permitted by right, which is denoted by a P, and conditional use, which is denoted by C. Next slide, please. But there are instances for some of the defined land use, although they show as a permitted use in the uses regulation table in a zoning district, but would need a conditional use permit to allow that land use in specific instances. Let's look at some of those instances in which that happens. For an example, correctional, this is another snapshot of one of the uses in the uses regulation table. Correctional facilities and correctional placement residences, limited and general, although listed as permitted by right uses in certain district, you can see it is denoted by P on the uses regulation table, shall always be considered conditional uses when located within 750 feet of a residential zoning district, unless separated by a major barrier. Here's a snapshot in the red box of the conditions that in those instances, it would be needing a conditional use permit. Next slide, please. This is another instance, a similar instance. This is for the use taverns and drinking establishments, clubs, nightclubs in the city, and entertainment establishments in the city. When considered, nightclubs in the city shall require a conditional use permit when located within 300 feet of a church or a place of worship, public park, or public or parochial school or residential zoning district. Next slide, please. The staff are recommending changes to make to the Unified Zoning Code uses table to make it easier for using and to have more clarity. The recommended changes would add an additional category of P/C to indicate situations where a defined land use may be permitted by right in a zoning district, but would need a conditional use permit to allow the land use in specific instances. You can see the snapshot of the Unified Zoning Code over here. The proposed changes are highlighted, which shows it will add an additional category of uses, C/P. It is important to note that the proposed changes will not modify other text in the Unified Zoning Code or what is allowed in the districts. The change is only intended to enhance the clarity and ease of use of the uses table. Here's a snapshot of the proposed uses regulation table, but you are provided with the full version of the proposed uses table in the staff report. Next slide, please. So if the Advanced Plan Committee decides to recommend this amendment to the MAPC, it would follow the process of public notice before the MAPC public hearing and eventually will be heard at the City Council and Board of County Commissioners. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
I have a question in the far right column, conditions. There appears to be codes in there for what those conditions are. Does your notes here, maybe I'm missing, I don't see what those codes represent. Like the D.6.1 and 0, or no, it's all D.6.1. And there's some other ones in there. What is that? What does that represent?
So those are the conditions for each of the uses that can we move to the proposed uses table slide, please? If I'm understanding correctly, you are asking about these conditions on the uses table. So these are the conditions, not necessarily all of them needs a conditional use permit, but they are conditions to be considered while giving the permits.
If I could, sir. Momita, can you give an example, maybe, what is it, entertainment near a school, or maybe there's an example maybe?
Tybin, if you could move to one of those slides with the tavern and nightclub, I think. Yes, thank you so much. So for an example, for the use of taverns and drinking establishment, clubs, nightclubs, and the city, although it's permitted in, you can see it's permitted in the LC zone or general commercial zone and a CBD. But then if any of these uses are within 300 feet of a church or a place of worship or a school or a residential zoning district, it would need a conditional use permit for those instances. But that doesn't necessarily show on the existing uses table that we have.
I'll expand just a little bit on that. So for some uses, as Momita's explained, they would be allowed by right except for certain circumstances. So I think, what was it, tavern or nightclub in the city was the example. If they're within a certain distance of a school or a park, then they cannot be permitted by right. They require a conditional use. And so that's why, for instance, you'll see a lot of those applications coming in the Delano area because of Seneca Park, which is just south of Douglas. So, and this table has actually been, I'll give you a personal experience. This has tripped me up before because I've been asked a question about, well, hey, is this land use permitted? I'll go to the table and it shows a P and I'm like, oh yeah, sure, it's permitted. But what you need to be very careful of is those conditions on the far right of the table, because although it shows a P in our current zoning code, on the table that's currently in our zoning code shows a P, but if you don't look at the conditions, you may actually be telling someone it's allowed by right when in fact it is only allowed by a conditional use. And so this is intended to better clarify that, to put that P/C so that people are aware that in some circumstances it may be a conditional use.
So, for instance, on the first page, church or place of worship, under conditions, it says D.6.NN. My question is, if I wanted to find out what that condition is, where would I go to look it up?
So you can go to the the zoning code to that article D6 for this one for tavern and drinking establishments, it's D6W. So you'll have to go to that section of the unified zoning code to find those conditions.
Okay, that answers my question. You can find that online with a link through
Yes.
the Metropolitan Area Planning Department.
Yes.
You can, and what I would emphasize on this is that this table will be part of the code. And so people will be able to quickly search through the code to find that reference to get them to the correct section of the code.
Yeah, I think that this is good and important that we've got a copy of this. So I assume this will go to the Planning Commission and all of the members of the commission will get this guide. So that's good
Yes.
stuff to be able to look up something in advance and see what's applicable and what the description is of the condition.
I move that we submit it to the planning commission with our recommendation.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. That
Very
we-
well done, by the way.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried unanimously. Okay, next item is a notification policy. Mary, do you want to take that one?
I do. This is another kind of another iteration in our discussion on notification processes. And the reason I'm just doing it from here today is this is just a preview of what I'll be presenting in October at our regular meeting in October. So what's happened here is that in late July this year, the city council had, their monthly workshop, and a presentation was made at that workshop on what all the research we've done to date. And so comments from the council centered on three questions or three areas. And one is, what's the possibility of using postcards for notification instead of letters? That's come up with this group as well. Incorporating other languages, if we can do that. And making the notification letter easier to read, because if you've read one of them, they're 4 pages long and they include a lot of information. And we found that from looking at other cities, they simply make reference to that, and you can go look that up if you want to. But we've kind of had a little bit of mission creep where we just keep expanding the information in the letter to the point of 4 pages, which is a lot. So like I said, today is just a preview on the research we're conducting on these 3 topics, and we'll make the presentation next month. So the first one is postcards. We surveyed 18 communities and found one community in Broomfield, Colorado, that allows an applicant as an option to use a postcard for notification purposes rather than the letter, but it's up to them. They shared with us that it's rarely used because in Colorado, Broomfield, they require the legal description to be printed right on that notification. We don't do that. We make reference to the legal description if someone wants it. But because of that, because legal descriptions can be short, but they can also be very, very long. So it's rarely used, they said. And so right now we're checking on cost to communicate this way, because it's quite possible we could go to a postcard if that works better for us and still get our map on there and the really necessary information. Another option that we're reviewing is to continue using the letter for all the people that are legally required to be notified, but use the postcard to notify renters and people maybe outside the notification area, should we decide to expand that so we can tell the difference. And so then the next one was languages. Producing letters in other languages is possible, but it could be impractical to provide every notice with all 3 languages. We would go, in our current state, we'd go from four pages to 12 pages in a notification. And I think it would be kind of confusing to people say, why are you sending this to me in Vietnamese? So the translation services are quite cost prohibitive. I inquired of one place, they provided me a quote, and it's about $140 to translate 1 letter. Again, that's if we keep it at 4 pages. We continue to investigate this, and we'll have some options for you at our next meeting. No other city out of the 18 that we spoke with provide any foreign language provision in their legal notifications. And so a lot of these kind of blend into one another, but the last one was the notification letter redesign. Let's just say we keep the letter, but we want to redesign it and make it hopefully shorter, get it to 2 pages, which is a page on the front, a page on the back, so it'd be 1 piece of paper. We currently have a 4-page letter, which is 2 pieces of paper, front and back. Be desirable to reduce that to 2 pages, meaning 1 page front and back. And we'd like to include a notice maybe where we say, if you need foreign language, and I shouldn't just call it foreign, it's just foreign to us. Okay, Spanish and Vietnamese, which are the common ones here in Wichita, that there'd be some way of communicating in that letter right away at the top, why they're getting this, what it is, and here's where you call to get a translation on that. There, of course, are some obstacles to that because you have to have someone answering the phone that can speak to these things. So, but that's another option that we have to consider and maybe work out the kinks if that's a desirable way to go. But something like we would say, this letter is a notice of a public meeting or hearing for a development application for information in, say, Vietnamese, please call da 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 da. Okay. And so again, obstacle is that if the person on the phone doesn't really understand all of the MAPD procedures, because you answer a question, it creates more questions. So that's what we have so far. And that's kind of describing the scope of what we'll be talking about next month.
How does our letter go? How does it relate to other communities our size?
Oh, well, our size, we've got some that are our size and not. It was anywhere from 1 page front only, no map, no anything, just text, to a text on the front, map on the back. Okay, that was like the minimum, all the way up to somebody sending out 6 pages.
Are there any state requirements, or is this just a city ordinance type thing that establishes what goes in that letter?
We are required by law to notify, but we're not required to include that legal description like Colorado had to. But the requirement is they have to be told, when is the meeting? What's it about? You know, what's the case number? Maybe a brief description and date, time, place. And it's just that over time we've added more things because we thought people would find it useful. But that goes back a long, long time. And you know how things happen. Sometimes you add something and nobody thinks to remove it 20 years later. So we're really examining what really needs to be in this, but also how do we provide information that allows them to link into our website where they can answer all those other questions that have taken up another 2 pages of like every zoning category. What's every zoning category? Not everyone needs that.
So I guess that would be my question is how do we minimize the amount of information that we're providing in a letter or on a postcard and just direct them to the website to get additional information? Because to me, that makes more sense than trying to put all the information in a letter. And maybe we even include a short blurb about if you don't have access to the internet, visit a local library or whatever and get their help. I don't know. I just think, our population is certainly diversified. And, we have a lot of Spanish speaking people in the community that don't read the English. So I think if there was something that could be created that would drive them to the website, even if you had to create that blurb in different languages, I just think ultimately driving them to the website for more information is the way to go.
This is Joe. I have a question. It seems like if they had the wherewithal to buy the property, they probably can figure it out.
That's
Yeah.
true.
If
Although
they had the language.
some of the people receiving this aren't the owners of that property. They're simply the people being notified that some sort of zoning action is taking place not too far from them.
Yeah, and I think another thing, I've seen cases in the past where people's property, they didn't pay property taxes for several years and their properties were sold because they didn't understand the process because they weren't English speaking. They didn't understand the process and what was going on. So I think, we want to be really cautious about not letting people know what their rights are.
Scott, do you have a comment?
I'm thinking for a moment, but I guess number one, it's always so helpful to get your opinions and to have you all weigh in on this because we deal with it on a daily basis. You're familiar with it, but I think you've got the perspective where you know both sides of it, and so it's so helpful to get your comments. As Mary indicated, this is just a quick conversation, highlight research that she's done, and I appreciate that so much. It's in response to comments that we received from the city council. I think they're very interested because they sit on the DABs and also because, of course, they receive phone calls and emails and whatnot and other communications. But I think especially sitting on the DABs during the DAB meetings, having members of the public come in just like you do for MAPC, in those formats in the DABs, I think they're a little less formal because they can be, because they don't cover as many items. And there's also a difference in terms of their advisory quasi judicial here. But a little less formal. And so I think that they get comments about, communications. And so I think they're very sensitive to that. And they've asked us to kind of look into it. So I appreciate the research that Mary's done. I think what we can do at the next one is outline kind of our letter and then maybe use colored blocks to show which elements are included in the letter at kind of a high level. And then we can talk about whether or not it makes sense to have those elements still included in a paper format or whether we can refer people to the website with that. In terms of the languages, I'm really interested personally in, I think it makes sense to me. I see some heads nod when Mary was talking about, copying the letter in different languages and sending out 3 versions of it. It would be so expensive. And so, again, what's that message that we can include if we can? A general message that's the same for every letter that can refer people to a service or a place where they can get that in a language that they're familiar with. So I think it's a very interesting discussion and just appreciate all your comments and thoughts on it.
I appreciate your comments, and I agree the language issue is something that we need to figure out some way to address. As far as notifying renters versus property owners, it seems to me that what we're dealing with here is property and that it relates more directly to owners than it does to renters. I would suggest that the city council members through their DAB are more interested in voters and people that live in their community to make sure that everybody gets notified. I don't know if we need to take on the responsibility of notifying every renter within the notification areas. Just my comments.
I, on the other hand, respect your opinion. But I think we see a change in living conditions, I guess, of people that are choosing to rent the same property for many years. And certainly whatever decisions that we make regarding zoning have the same impact on those people who are renting that they have on those people that are property owners. Maybe a little bit easier for the renter to up and move, although today with the lack of affordable housing, it may not be. So I think both opinions are important.
And I would just add, I think we've seen both of these. I think the comments that you both provided have been representative of kind of the dialogue that has occurred through this. So I appreciate you both bringing that up. We've heard from the city council, at least from a couple of council members that were vocal during the workshop item, that it's important to them and they would support distributing it to the properties, not just the property owners. How that works out and how that could be operationalized, I think, is our challenge on in the department, and that we would bring that back to you for your comments at a later date, probably when we get done with this conversation about the languages and use of postcards and those items. So lots of different facets to this one. I appreciate the comment about, again, who receives them. And I guess I would just close by saying, we'll hopefully I plan to tackle that one after we get some thoughts on what the direction should be with these other 3 items. So we can bring that back to you and then later to the city council to see if there should be changes.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I think we receive and file this action, and that you will consider it further and bring it back to us. Okay. So moving on to project updates, Scott, would you like to go through that?
Yes, and the first thing is I offer an apology because it has been so busy the last couple of weeks that I've not been able to get you the update. So what I will do is commit to working on getting that in a digital format to you all when Mary sends out the draft notes for you to review. So I'll get that to you relatively soon. What I would indicate, and you've probably seen this from your MMPC agendas, is that we continue to see a robust number of cases come in. We've got a little bit of ebb and flow as we normally do, but I think that we're well over 10 cases for the next, for the majority of agendas for the next 3 or 4 coming up. So we've seen a lot of activity going on, and it's not just new development, but just people who are looking at changing land uses at sites. So it's been a real mix. So we continue to be busy with that. In terms of staffing, we've got Brad, who has joined us recently. We've got Greg, who is helping doing the subdivision stuff. They're working out very, very well. We're very excited that they're here. We've got employees who have been here for a little bit longer duration. So Momita, and we've got Christina, who's been here for a couple, I think almost a couple of years. So the employees who have been here for a little while longer are picking up more responsibilities. And so it's been really good to see this kind of evolution through the department. We still have 2 vacancies that are, we have 2 vacancies. They're both important, as all of them are. Excuse me. But we've got the principal planner in advanced plans and the senior planner position. We are doing interviews for the senior planner position in the next couple of weeks. We are in discussions. We've made a job offer for the principal planner position. So cross my fingers that goes well. So we've got those 2, and I think those filling those positions will be really important for us. In terms of the initiatives, I'm going to jump to that. Short-term rentals, you may have seen on the news, was recently at the city council. On Tuesday, there were 3 components that the city council had in front of them to consider. The first was licensing and whether short-term rentals should be licensed. This was a change to the municipal code, and the city council approved that. It will go into effect not this Friday, but next Friday when it gets published in the paper. The second element that they looked at was nuisance party houses. This was a change to municipal code and would apply to all residential properties. That was a distinction that was clarified at the city council meeting, and there was quite a bit of questions about this. The city council, their perception was that it was mostly affiliated with short-term rentals. So they opted to collect additional feedback about whether or not the ordinance as written applying to all residences is a good fit for Wichita. So they deferred that one, I believe, until November. So we'll be going out and getting some more feedback and then coming back with that one. The third element was the zoning change. You're all well familiar with that one. That's to create the administrative permit process and a conditional use process for the short-term rentals. That was approved by the city council. And so we are now working on implementing that. So we've got quite a bit of work coming up with implementation for short-term rentals, but the two pieces of the regulations were approved and the third is under additional consideration. I'll keep rolling. College Hill Neighborhood Plan. That one, we have a contract with a vendor to help us out with that one. That is RDG, and they've got PEC is helping out with that one. Where we are right now is that we're in the process of providing names for a steering committee. So if folks are interested, just let us know. But we're looking to the city council to appoint the steering committee for that one. And we hope to have the first meeting sometime in October for that steering committee. Once that first meeting occurs, then it allows us to go out for public input. So you'll see surveys, you'll see open houses, those types of events take place. Nightclub in the city. This one has been one that has been on the books for us, but continues to kind of sit there as we've had other priorities come up. We're working on scheduling that meeting with the nightclub operators. So I believe that will take place now sometime in October. We've had to push that back a little bit. Places for people, still very much where that one was the last time. Public notification, you received an update on that one. And then Old Town. So for the Old Town zoning changes, you may have been a little bit surprised to see it on the agenda at the end of today's meeting towards the end. That item is on the MAPC agenda because since we have a joint city and county code, we needed to make sure that we got the county public notice published in the newspaper. So in effect, we've got to have a second public hearing on that one. I don't expect I don't expect the same attendance that we had last time. I think everyone got a chance to air that out at the last meeting, but that's why it's on the agendas for publication purposes. And once that's done, we actually have this scheduled for the city council meeting next week on next Tuesday. So with that, that takes us through some of the things that we're working on, and I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions?
So if I had an interest in serving on the steering committee for the College Hill plan, I would just need to express that to my city council rep.
Yeah, I would encourage you to do that. That'd probably be the best format. And in fact, I would perhaps encourage you to reach out to Councilmember Johnson, just because this is in that District 1, and so he may be the best one.
Yeah, I own a property right there on the edge of College Hill.
There any other comments of Scott? At this point, we invite comments from the public. Is there anybody present or that is online virtually that would like to speak? If you do, you have 2 minutes. Three, I'm sorry.
Sure, maybe 4. On the notification letters that were sent out, my household is probably indicative. I read them, I kind of understand them, I look stuff up. My wife looks at it and says, "What the hell is this?" And so, and despite folks who own houses, probably 99% of the people who get those letters are looking at it like it's gibberish. And unless you have something right at the lead, it's going to get tossed. And translation issue could be handled by a link. You can scan those, put them through a translator, and it'll have a Vietnamese translation, Italian, whatever you want to do. So that might, if you do a postcard thing, translation, link this, link this, link this, and they can look it up if they have the inclination to do so. The other thing too is, like Mary said, you mentioned, I believe, is renters are citizens too. And so there's a lot more of them out there because of institutional buying of homes, of especially the last few years. A lot of realtor friends I talked to said for months and months and months, over a year, said 90% of their houses were sold by somebody in a suit and a briefcase. It wasn't a family. Let's see. The steering committee. You know, we're kind of worried about in Riverside, College Hill, and Crown Heights. We're kind of concerned about institutional takeover of local neighborhoods. Some people don't think neighborhoods are important. World War II, Boeing couldn't do anything until they built Plainview. You have to have a neighborhood, you have to have housing for even to run a Wendy's. So I think that's one of the focuses that, you know, the city should be looking, that's the number one issue facing it. The other thing is steering committee, and this is personal because I do live in College Hill and I'm one of the board members. I'm really not kind of worried of loading the steering committee up with a bunch of folks from WABA who think that anything that's built that's older than 1960 needs to be mowed down and started over. So looking to keep our neighborhood. There's a reason people move to these neighborhoods. Some of it's economics, some of it's desirability, and you know, a lot of history, and then just a lot of housing in there. We got apartments, we got little condos in there. We want a little protection. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you for your comments. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Forgot all about that. Jack Patton, 337 South Rattan, Wichita, Kansas.
Question on the steering committee, are citizens that are not involved on one of our committees eligible to participate in that?
Sure. I'd like to speak a little bit, and thanks for the opportunity to address that one. So on the steering committee, I guess one of the best examples was for we want to get a broad cross section of the community, because at the end of the day, the steering committee will be the group that will provide the recommendation to the city council about what the plan, what should be in the plan, what the contents of the plan are. And so, for instance, for the bicycle master plan, we didn't want a bunch of guys who are 30 years old and wear a bunch of spandex and ride 100 miles on the weekend to be what comprised the steering committee, only them, because then they would provide the recommendation to city council, and the rest of the people in the neighborhood or in the community would say, well, heck, they don't represent us. That's a plan just for them. So by the same token, we want to make sure it's a broad cross section. So, you know, it'd be, I think, advantageous to have, for instance, at least one business owner who operates a business in College Hill. I think you want to have a resident of College Hill. I think you want to have an owner. I think you want to have a renter. I think you want to have someone who's interested in the swimming pool. I think you want to have someone who's interested in the park. I think you want to have a representative who's tied into the schools in the area, maybe one or more representatives that do that. Also the churches. We know that the churches are going to be important organizations because of how they are lined up on Douglas. So there will be individuals who meet one or more, maybe 3 or 4 of those perspectives that they can bring to the table. At the size of the steering committee, I would recommend something in the order of, 11 to 13, maybe 15. that allows for the group to be small enough that you can do work, but large enough that 2 or 3 people can be missing due to family commitments or whatever else comes up, that you can keep moving forward. So lots of great options on this one. It's a great area. There's a lot of folks who are very vested in it, have a stake in it, and are very passionate. And so we're excited to see how the steering committee comes together and see how many different perspectives can be on there.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. I would encourage you to contact Scott if you or anybody you know is interested in participating.
Oh, I got a couple hundred people on.
Are there any other comments from the public? If not, we will stand adjourned until our next meeting in October.